Hello, hello. Good evening. Good evening. You all, thank you so much for joining this evening. Yes, we're focusing on turning student responses into next level questions because we've been talking a lot about questions. However, the reality is we need to make sure that we're having the proper response. We're giving students space to respond. And even if it's a response that maybe isn't correct or it's a little incomplete, we know what to do about that. So that's what we're focusing on, making sure that this evening we're equipped with strategies, right? For what happens when we have, whether it's correct, incorrect, or incomplete, that we know what to do, how to deepen students' thinking and their learning process. That is just a springboard for us to dive a bit deeper. That's always the goal. So here we go. Think about this. We all have asked questions where a student, I'm not going to say where it's only been an incorrect response. Maybe it's correct, incorrect, again, or incomplete. But I want you to really reflect on how you tend to respond. Do you just say yes, no? You say, okay, try again. Do you call on another student? What do you normally do? I'm going to drop some options to you all in the chat. A quick question for how you usually respond when we're talking about student thinking. Uh-oh, it's telling me it's too long. So, A, right? Do you gently correct it and move on? Do you say, no, that's not it? And you say what the answer is and move on? B, do you ask another student, right? Especially when I know early on when I was teaching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was popular. So we would often say, okay, phone a friend, use your lifeline. Yeah. So do you quickly move on to another student for the correct answer? C, do you ask a follow up question to guide their thinking? Or maybe you're on team D, Anika, you know what? I'm not really sure. I don't know if I have a go to move. I don't know if I have a strategy. So, again, in the chat, you have A, B, and C. What are some of the things? What are some of the things, your typical response when you receive an incorrect answer from a student? Do you correct them and move on, right? Do you have them phone a friend? Do they use a lifeline? Go to another student? Do you ask a follow up question to guide their thinking? This is what we're talking about. We're building it out. Okay, someone said they ask a follow up question to guide their thinking. Excellent. Again, though, while we're talking about these follow up questions, we want to make sure that they're deep, right? So it's almost like a cycle that I want to make sure we're building, that we have these really well thought out questions that we're focused on, we're building it out. The students respond, then what? What is our follow up question? What are our follow up movements? That's the goal we're focusing on. So, being clear that the best, the best learning moments come from how we respond to student thinking. Not just those initial questions, but what happens after they give us a response, whether correct, incorrect, incomplete, that allows us to move again more deeply. I want you all to think of student responses more like the starting point instead of the finish line, right? The traditional way we tend to view question and answers, especially in math life, I'm asking you the question, you got it correct. Whew, glad that's done, right? So it's more like a finish line type thing. But the reality is, I want us to shift that and think about student responses more like a starting point. Okay. So we're going to get specific this evening about how to respond. We're going to have some sample questions. Surprise, surprise, right? Y'all like, oh, she's talking about Johnny and these apples one more time. So we're not talking about Johnny and his apples tonight, but we have some other sample questions this evening with correct responses from students, incorrect responses from students, and then some incomplete answers. We're going to talk about how to transform those follow up questions to make sure it's powerful, but also, y'all know, we're going to talk about how AI can enhance that and empower the teacher to make sure students are thinking more deeply. Okay. All right. So, again, shifting away from the student answer as the finish line to y'all, it's the starting point. So, these questions that we ask, we take our time, we craft these questions, we know they're important, but some common mistakes when handling the responses, right? We're thinking about The crafted question, student response, then what? The student response tends to only acknowledge correct answers. So we might move too quickly past incorrect answers. And again, students develop this mindset and hold their whole MO, the whole way that they operate on right versus wrong instead of the process behind it. How do we get the correct answer? Why is this not the correct answer? So we're shifting all of that because we want to make sure that the student responses, y'all know I love analogies, that the student responses are more like windows, right? It's a window to their thought process. And instead of shutting it down, right, we're going here, yes or no, it's a traditional window, right? Where you can envision someone, y'all know I like the different memes and gifs from social media, where Kermit is looking out the window. It's a little window. He has his hand on the glass, but it's a traditional window. We're shifting past the traditional window. I want you to think about, and maybe I've watched too much HGTV with family. The family members know who they are. We're shifting from a traditional window to the floor to ceiling window. Sometimes it's called a window wall, right? The glazed wall, because literally the whole section is a window. But think about that. The more we dig into students' thinking process, the more understanding we have and can provide more understanding for them. What? Yeah, that's a bar right there. That was a bar. Okay. So, how we respond is more important than the question itself. Y'all tell me if you agree or disagree with that. How we respond is more important than the question itself. You can say an A or a D. A agree, D disagree. How we respond is more important than the question itself. What do you think? So the student response as a starting point versus an endpoint, that's different. It is, and especially, and I feel comfortable speaking on it for sure. Right after all these years for math, because again, they got the right answer. Let's move on. But it should be a starting point to deeper conversation, to math talks. Okay, a lot of y'all are agreeing with that. So let's get into it then. The traditional approach. If we are again thinking about traditional approach, I'm asking the question, they got the answer correct or incorrect, and we move on, we're making sure, well, excuse me, when we shift, we're making sure that we are able to analyze student thinking more deeply and we can generate deeper follow-ups. Like conversation can really get rich and deep. Sometimes the students are like, what time do we leave? When they're into it, when they're engaged and you're locked into their thinking, those are those moments when it's like, class is over already. And there's this deep, intentional, relevant connection to the content by design. So we're talking about by design. Traditional approach would say, all right, you all, what's 1/2 plus 1/3? And the student might say, okay, well, it's 2/5. Well, no, the correct answer is 5/6. No explanation, just we're moving on. You weren't correct. So this shift, this transformational approach we're discussing, the shift will be, okay, so what's the same question? And when that student says 2/3, well, I can see, excuse me, when they say 2/5, I can see how you got that. I can see where that answer came from. But tell me, what operation did you use? How did you decide you were going to add the fractions? When you've added fractions before, because in this case, the fractions have different denominators, right? When you've added fractions before, when they had the same denominator, what happened? What did you notice? What rule did you discover? Right? How did you figure out what you wanted to do first? Yeah, all of this, so many questions specific to their process, their thinking, because that's what we want to know. Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to how adults are thinking about something and how the young people are thinking about something, yeah, we're worlds apart. We are miles up. We're worlds and miles apart, I promise. You're like, how did they? When they're looking at us like, well, why did you think? So we need to ask questions. And even while we're asking the questions, please be quiet and listen. A lot of people in the classroom, especially because they know the answers, they understand the reasoning, they ask questions with the intention to be ready to explain instead of seeking understanding of someone else's thought process so you can best help. So be very careful about that. Some of us are talking too much too soon when we're asking our questions. Hold that thought. While we're shifting, the whole point is we want to help diagnose the misconceptions. So the fraction example was by design, y'all, because the world of fraction, like it's a corny teacher joke that says 5 out of 4 people have problems with fractions. What? Okay, so we're making sure we're diagnosing the misconceptions. We want to encourage students to reflect on their thinking so they can refine their thinking. And all of this will help with engagement and critical thinking overall. Our students are doing their math learning. All right, so here's the deal. We're going to do kind of a case study approach going through the different types of responses, right? Correct, incorrect, and incomplete. And we're going to talk about how the transformation approach will look, the transformative approach should sound, the response, and then also how AI can add to that. So here we go. Case A, case number one, the correct answer, but maybe not a whole lot of explanation, right? I know I got it right, so this is my answer. So maybe the teacher says, what's 15 divided by 3? Student says 5. Common reaction. Great. Wonderful. All right, next question. What? Lots of context and learning were lost. So pause, hold that thought. And we're going to take it to the next level, right? These next level questions. Instead of just great, move on, the student says 5. How do you know? Can you show me how you solved it? Or if they happen to explain, can you show me another way to solve it? Can you explain this differently? Right? Sometimes we've talked about this before. Like I'm on YouTube now. The young people are very aware of people streaming and having all kind of different content. Sometimes I'll say, okay, give me your top 2 tips. If you were producing content about fractions on YouTube and someone's watching your video, how would you explain this question to them? They're in the zone. They understand exactly, right, what's been set and what the expectation is because they've seen people stream on all kind of different content, whether it's gamers, whether it's education things. If I'm like, I need you to explain your thinking, I need you to give me a POV, right, the point of view for the gamers, I need the play-by-play, they're locked in. Oh, Mrs. Jones, first what I did was, and then I was thinking, and they literally lay it all out. But how often are we asking? How often are we asking and being still and quiet enough to hear the response as well? So shifting that, even when they get it correct, y'all, make them explain why. AI can actually help with that because again, AI can generate different representations. So maybe we have more visual learners, so they're given more visuals. They're given different kind of models. Maybe the student is like, I mean, I kind of understood it, but I don't know what I'm going to use this. Guess what? We're generating real world examples. So that's the enhancement, that's the level up for maybe the student that answered the question correctly, but didn't tell why. All right, case number 2. You ask the question, but it's incorrect. But you understand how they got it. It was logical. It's not what we normally do, but it's logical. For example, what's the area of the rectangle with with sides of 4 and 5? Student said 9. Common reaction, we might say, no, that's wrong. Try again. Next level reaction, how did you get 9? To uncover the thinking, right? Are we adding? Are we multiplying? We're focused on area. Why? Why should we choose that operation? If we were going to draw a picture, would it match what you were thinking? So all of this again to open up, getting them talking some more, you gaining insight so you can best support. If you're not truly, I'm saying you, but you, me, right? If we aren't truly understanding what they're thinking, what they know, we're kind of just shooting in the dark and trying to shoot up the middle for how to support. So we have to know details. We have to know specifically. Okay. Someone said, this is a great tip. I'm definitely guilty of waiting to explain and talking too much. And I'm gonna mess. I'm gonna mess a little bit. So I know just working with different parents as well, because parents, especially if we're in homework help mode, we're helping for homework. So let me ask you, but let me make sure I'm ready to explain. No, let's make sure we're listening. Let's make sure we're listening. That's for everyone though, right? I'm teasing my parents some because I know I have some parents checking in, but this is for everyone. Educator life, they call it wait time on your evaluation. right? Did the educator show sufficient wait time between asking their questions? Then when you did, again, what was your response? Was it a simple, well, no, that's not correct? Or did you really ask some probing questions to get deep into their knowledge, their understanding? Okay. So, but I appreciate the reflection and the honesty, definitely. So, when we're talking about the responding to the incorrect answers, again, instead of no, that's not right, we can also say, tell me how you got that. What were you thinking? Right? Tell me about what you were thinking. Or that's an interesting idea. Can you walk me through your process? Again, that walk through the process. If some of the kids are a little iffy about it, tell them, walk me through your process. Pretend like you're a YouTuber. Go and watch how they shift and let you know and take you step by step. You all, the reason that this matters is because, again, it keeps students engaged. We're going to talk quite a bit about math disengagement, student disengagement, period, but clearly in math, because it stops them from shutting down. They're locked in instead. Oh, you want to know what I was thinking? You want to know what I did? Especially if at that point you didn't say if the answer was correct or not. All I'm doing is defending and telling you how I got there. We didn't say yes or no yet, right? They gave you your answer. They gave an answer rather. Okay, interesting. Tell me how you got that. And even students that I may work with directly, they already know at this point that they can give me two different answers back to back, right? If it's like a multiple choice, they only have two responses to choose from. Oh, Mrs. Jones, I think it's 4. Okay, why? Oh, actually, I think it's 5. Okay, why? Like my facial expression, my question to them did not change because I need you to tell me what was going on. What did you process? How did you make your decision on what operations to choose? Was there something else that you've done before this and another grade that this reminded you of? So all these things we want them to say. We want to hear them. So again, we're asking the question, but again, pausing, being quiet so we can hear their response. Okay, someone said, I like the asking questions about how you got even the correct answer because sometimes students arrive at answers rather intuitively. Definitely. Okay. Love that comment because a couple of things about it. For students where some topics in math are going to come easily, it is going to be intuitive. So when they maybe get to different levels of algebra, so middle school life, different levels of geometry and algebra, high school life, where it's not as intuitive, you really have to understand deeply the concepts. We might be stuck because we have never been challenged on the process for how we got there to explain our process or how we know this process works. But the more they're able to do that, the more they're able to articulate those things, how I arrived at my answer, how I chose what operation to use. Another way I can prove this, I showed you algebraically, but here's a model because we've been practicing and working with them all these different ways. That improves their resilience. Y'all know the SEL, the social emotional learning is never far. That improves the SEL, but it also improves, again, their overall concept and the depth of their learning and their grit. There's a common thing. Like if someone said the answers might come rather intuitively, there's a common thing that students who are in GT, accelerated programs, things of that nature, these different designations, that sometimes they carry some anxiety, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm in this group, I have this classification, I'm supposed to be doing this and so, but not understanding that they're in a challenging situation. And so we're challenging them in every regard. So, okay, if math is normally your strong suit, awesome. But we have to be able to explain it as well because you're going to do presentations one day. One day you're going to present to someone and you're going to make sure they're understanding what you're trying to communicate. Slash, if they haven't been challenged in their critical thinking, their process, they're applying their learning, their knowledge. When they get to college, sometimes that's why students drop out. Let me know if you've heard about this before, right? Students that they've been able to breeze through K-12 without much challenge, without much issue. Then they get to college and it's the first time they're feeling a challenge. They don't know how to recover. They don't know how to reset, to bounce back, to go back and evaluate the process to evaluate the thinking. Y'all let me know if you haven't heard of that. Let me be the first to tell you then that that is another thing that's impacting post-secondary performance and how students are choosing to move. Because again, if this is the first time, and so I'll say this, when I'm talking with parents, I often tell them, I'm like, look, I know it's hard. That's your baby. I know that's your baby. That's your boo boo. They're 6, they're 8, and they're having a hard time, but you want them to have this hard time now. So they develop these strategies for how to deal with it, because when they have to push through later in life, they have something to draw back on. They have previous experience, previous life experience, right? Even their young life, they have previous life experience to draw on so that they can maneuver how they need to, so they can do what they need to do. Okay. I know it's hard because you're like, oh, that's my little it is. I get it. That's your little person, but in the big scheme of their life, you want them to have those experiences earlier so they again can develop what they need to. Okay? So we want to challenge. Explain your reasoning. Show me another way. All these different things, y'all, these are pieces of, yes, the math classroom, math learning puzzle, but really life puzzle. Because again, the SEL is never too far from the math in my world. Y'all know that. Let's see. Someone said, yep, I have college students feeling that now. Yes, because things have been not that it's just been straight A's all day, every day. It's been mostly maybe straight A's every day. And now I have a concept that is rocking my world, this class, and I got a C. And I might have to withdraw and try to take it during the summertime, right? Some of those stories. And we have to have that real talk. Slash, even sometimes you have to remind them, right? Sometimes we have to be reminded. Remember, you went through something like this when you were in middle school. You went through some of this when you were in high school. Do you remember what you did? How did you adjust? So again, listen, y'all, still asking questions. Didn't just give them the answer. Well, what you need to do is first you need to make sure you block out your schedule and you ask questions. Let them reflect. Okay. All right, y'all. Now I'll go off on that. Someone said, I have a senior daughter and pray we have set her up for success. Goodness. Listen, Tam, I have no doubt. I'm preaching tonight. All right then. All right. Listen, y'all know listen, for these two topics though, the math and SEL, I truly cannot separate them. You're going to get, because a lot of people, we do kind of say, okay, content is content, but the reality is we're teaching people. So we're teaching people, we're making sure that we're super intentional about what type of experience they're getting while they're learning, because it's still a piece of their life puzzle, their life experience puzzle. So we're super careful about that. Glad that you keep the SEL close, so effective. I think so, Okay. So we're talking about the incorrect answer, right? It's incorrect, but it's logical. So they're thinking through it. So what that'll help us do when we ask the shifted questions, it'll help us uncover some of the misconceptions. Because maybe I just think we add the numerator and denominator for fractions, and it's just that easy. We move on, right? But we're able to uncover the errors in the thinking, the misconceptions. And one thing that AI can do, one of the things, because y'all know I say this, a Swiss Army knife and not a hammer. It's a multifaceted tool. AI can help predict common misconceptions. So if I know the student is maybe going to want to add those denominators in one of the AI platforms, right, we're flushing out some questions about it. We can generate tailored follow-up questions. If I ask this, the students may respond right with an incorrect answer where they added the denominators. Now what? These are some thoughts I have for follow-up questions. Let's add to it, right? Generate more. All that to say, I know a lot of districts at this point are leaning on scripted curriculums. Now let me lean to the side and lean in for a minute. These scripted curriculums, I'm gonna say okay, but also some of the scripted curriculums can do some prediction for common misconceptions to an extent. But this is like the caveat. This is the caution that they're not able to adjust in real time for any shifts and trends. When I say shifts and trends, even think about something as simple as what some words mean to young people right now, like some of the alpha young people, right? We're using words like beta in Ohio and all this kind of stuff. That some of these trends that if we're explaining things just from an older lens, they don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so it's not able to shift readily for trends. Um, Sometimes there's new misconceptions just because of a lot of social media trends. Like these are going to be the most um, social. Like okay, if Gen Z, they're digital natives, Alpha generation, they're social media natives. Like social media in all the different platforms. I think all platforms for most of them have existed their whole lives. Think about that for a minute. Like they don't know life not just without the internet, but they don't know life without Instagram, without Facebook, and a lot of them, for most of their childhood, if not all, they know TikTok. So think about some of the trends there and how that's shaping some of their perspectives and feeding some misconceptions. Also, the scripted curriculums are not able to emphasize certain representations, not just different ethnic backgrounds, but also learning styles. It doesn't speak to them all. Superpowers, special skills, designations, different classifications. It doesn't speak to a lot of the nuances. When we're thinking about this, I have a very specific example, and I had to laugh. I said, "Whoa!" Working with some eighth graders one day, a group. I was like, "Well, okay, time out. Wait a minute." So, getting deep for a minute, but let me know. Do y'all remember like squaring a number in square root? Right? Squaring a number in square root. So something I have been able to use as a strategy, a visual strategy, and just trying to make a connection for years is that, you would take like the analog clock, and instead of the numbers like the one, two, three, four, all the way around to 12, we would replace it with square roots. So, like for instead of 12, it would show like the square root of 144. Instead of one, it would show the square root of one. Instead of two, it would show the square root of four. So, just helping the young people to lock in what these different things mean. And it was our constant conversation, especially for the unit, for the difference between the square root and squaring a number and how we got there, right? Guess what? At a certain point, I remember when we shifted where it was only there were only analog clocks at school. I remember that when kids would come to school, it's like I only see this kind of clock at school, Miss Jones, right? But okay, yeah, I'm learning how to tell time on the school clock. All right. Then guess what schools started doing? These newer schools. They started using digital clocks too. So imagine trying to explain that we're talking about, okay, right, you have a blank clock, fill in the numbers, fill in the square root. And the kids are like, I don't even know what this is, ma'am. I don't know what this is. I haven't seen a clock. Maybe since third grade where they were trying to teach us about time. And now you want me to fill in a clock, an analog clock. They were like, nope, I don't know what to do with this. So these trends, again, so this is just one of the examples for being careful about the scripted curriculum because there's certain trends and shifts that are very nuanced that unless you witnessed it, you lived it out, that you would not, yeah, you just wouldn't know. You wouldn't. So do y'all remember that though? Do y'all remember squares and square roots? And can y'all imagine, right? A lot of us on here, adults, we are visualizing the analog clock, but that there's people 20 and under that they're like, nope, no, thank you. I don't even know what that does, what that is for real. I kind of know about it, but okay. Someone said I had that issue in college myself. Things always coming easy and feeling like it was natural. It was a struggle to have a lock in. So it's one of those things that we're talking about, just the shift, right? If we're reflecting ourselves, right? Because we're reflecting ourselves so we can better help or do our best to help and support the younger generations, then yeah, then okay, we want them to be in challenging situations. I know that's different for a lot of educators, a lot of parents, but we want them to be in those situations now because we want them to build themselves up. We want them to have that grit. We want them to have those skills, those go-to moves. Like I've dealt with something like this before So now what? What process can I think on that can help me? Right? Okay. So I know that was a super specific example, but there's more. I promise. That's just one quick one. So we talked about responding when the answer is correct, when it's incorrect. Now, this confused or maybe incomplete answer. Math life, it happens. It happens more, probably more in math than other classes. But we're changing that. That's some of why we're having this conversation, right? So if a teacher's asking the student, okay, so how do we find the perimeter of this shape? The student's just like, listen, I do not know. I don't know. Common reaction, more traditional reaction would say, move to another student. I told you, like that, phone a friend, use a lifeline. Hey, calls, right? Can somebody help? What's the answer? But our shift, our next level question, what do you notice about the shape? What kind of shape is it? What do you know about this shape? Can you remember what perimeter means? Okay, tell me, right? So, can you estimate maybe how we can find the perimeter before we actually calculate it? So, again, all of these things to kind of, we call it scaffolding, to kind of meet them where they are, give them some layers of a bridge to help them close that gap, to help them get where they need to be. So instead of just moving on, we're asking for more detail. We're asking what they meant by that. Is there a rule that you know of for this situation? Is there a rule that you discovered recently or a pattern? A lot of students respond to the word pattern better than rule. I think rule was more people in my generation. Okay. What about if we test this with a different example? Again, you all, we always want to make sure we're pushing deeper thinking because it's going to again prevent students from relying, on rules that they maybe just memorized without any understanding. Because if they're just memorizing rules, they're not going to know when to apply them. If there's no context, nothing to connect it to, they're not going to know when to apply it. Right. So that's when you get students, again, area perimeter. Maybe they're multiplying for a perimeter and adding for area, right? When it should be the opposite because they don't have an understanding of what the measurements just even mean, let alone how to find them, right? Which one means, okay, we're covering the inside, and which one are we doing like the edge of a shape to trim? It's, there's some confusion. So, of course, the formula is going to be a bit mixed up, a bit misused. An AI connection. So again, a lot of the chat bots, a lot of the different AI platforms, we just talked about the scaffolding questions. They do that really well, right? By breaking concepts into smaller, more approachable prompts. So, especially if you're noticing and you know your students, you know your young person, you know that there's a certain tendency that they have. Imagine creating or having the AI create prompts for questions with that in mind. Super specific. It's that much more tailored and customized, right? So, again, with this next level questioning, I had a second grader that I was working with, and we really had to work on not as much her skill set, some her skill set, but also using the correct language. And so this was also talking with and working with the parents as well, right? Because if in second grade, which we were working on some concepts from previous grades, we're working on one more, one less is the official term, but sometimes at home, right? We would especially say, well, what's the bigger number? And so the student might say, oh, and then choose what's the bigger number. And I would say, wait, time out, flag on the play. I'm like, that's not matching what she's going to hear and see, right? On assignments in class and just in general conversation, it's not going to be what's the bigger number. We're talking about greater than, less than, one more, one less. So tying all of this in and making sure again that the language matches. So that was another moment for AI to help with the next level responses, right? Because I was hearing the student response. So for my follow-up, it was super specific, like, okay, we're thinking about questions to ask. We're thinking about certain tasks and activities to do that help to correct this thinking in the word choice. And y'all are like, Anika, that's the same thing. That's not a big deal. So remember, I worked all the way up. So we get to middle school and someone has been answering the question, what's the bigger number? When you see negative 1,000 versus the number three, guess which one they choose? If they're saying, oh, what's the bigger number? And what they've learned bigger number to mean, that is longer, right? So when we're talking about the actual size of the number versus the value, that's why that word choice is important. So again, that was another moment for AI to help support, again, that leveling up, the next level. Like, what are some tasks, right? And help with some scaffolding questions to continue to enhance as we help let go of the bigger number and we're focusing on greater than, less than, one more, one less, the actual value of the number. That might seem like something small, but it causes problems when they get to middle school, you all. So again, um, AI can also give real-time feedback, right, for student responses and suggest the follow-up questions. We talked about some of the differentiation that can happen based on the learning styles, the ethnic backgrounds, representation for certain designations, right? Advanced students, struggling students, English language learners, all of this. Y'all, multiple ways to phrase the questions for deeper engagement. Imagine if you know there's a class, and one year I had a class like this. It was early on. I was like, oh my gosh, you did this schedule. I had a class of 32. 3 girls were in that class. Yeah, you do the math. I had 29 11-year-old boys in that class, y'all. So so at that time they were into some were into sports, some were into Pokemon, some whatever it was at the time. I'm just like, wow, because I know I was generating, trying to generate and revise questions myself that would get them more engaged, that was speaking more to topics they were interested in, right? So just imagine being able to do that more consistently and faster just with the support of AI, especially when you know your kids' interests and what they're into and helping them translate. Well, this question asks you this, but if the scenario is confusing, right? Because sometimes some of the word choices, they might be asking a 6-year-old about someone sewing a dress. Yeah. Okay. So the 6-year-old is not going to know necessarily, the average 6-year-old is not going to know a lot about someone sewing a dress, but we can change it to something that they're more familiar with and get them even used to swapping out, right? The concept, the context, the topic of a question, because that's its own strategy as well. Like if you're not sure, let's see if we can replace a couple of the words, a couple of the nouns with something that we like, something we're interested in, and help it make sense, right? Okay. So just some thoughts, because again, AI can help with alternative questions based on that, not just student answers, but student interest. So you might have a question. What if a student refuses? They're like, I'm not explaining it, right? Like, I don't know, Ms. Jones, I don't. So sometimes you have to hype them up. That's the only way I can say it. Like, well, I'm just really curious. I want to know, like that good thinking, your good brain. What were you thinking? What was going through your mind when you answered that question? You might have to oversell it a little bit. Or a peer discussion to kind of break the ice before building up that confidence where they share with the whole class, right? So talk with your neighbor. What did you get? Explain how you got your answer. We're going to come together in 45 seconds. We'll talk to your neighbor first. What if someone might be thinking, I mean, listen, man, all this sounds great, but I don't have all this time. Listen. If you're short on time, which that is the way of the world in the classroom, you're short on time. Not every question has to be a deep dive. I'm not saying that. Not every question has to be a deep dive. You're choosing 1 or 2 key moments per lesson. And yes, you've predetermined what those key moments are going to be. You already have in your mind, we're probably going to have to build this one out a little more. It's going to be this question, and I'm going to make sure we emphasize this part. You pre-plan that, even with those scripted curriculums and scripted lessons. You pre-plan it. What's going to be your really big anchor moments? Those things that you do a deep dive. Because look, yeah, I know you cannot afford to deep dive on every single one. Not every single one. And I get it. We talked about, I'll say this, if you missed last week's stream, where we talked about navigating some of the fears and anxiety around AI, but AI connected to education, please go back and watch that one because you may be really thinking, can AI make this easier? Yes, I can't say it enough. I've given several examples while we've been talking and listening here, but definitely by generating alternative phrasing, different prompts, scaffolded questions, you all, yes, in real time, yes, it can definitely help. It can definitely help. So, y'all let me know. Y'all let me know how y'all feeling about this information. If you've heard something, let me know if you've heard something this evening that you're like, okay, you give me something to think about. I have a couple things I can adjust, I can try. Y'all let me know in the chat. Someone said, great point regarding vocabulary, potentially great impact both ways with or without the vocabulary. Definitely, definitely. Okay, some good things to think about. So, one of the takeaways, right, as we're getting ready to close, I want you to really pause and sit with this for a minute that all student responses, right, wrong, in between, right, that there are all opportunities for learning deeper, right? I almost wish that sometimes walking down a hallway in on a campus, y'all know Spike Lee, how he would have someone that will pop up during his movies and say, message, right? To make sure people are recognizing and anchoring in the learning opportunity because so many are missed. Remember, not every single one has to be dug into deeply, but one or two moments each lesson. Y'all, that's impactful, very impactful. So I wish, I almost wish that that was like a real thing in real life, that someone would pop up and say message, like in the Spike Lee movie, to make sure we're recognizing the opportunities to learn deeper, whether again, the student response was correct, incorrect, or somewhere in between. Our simple questions, y'all, that can turn passive learners into active thinkers by us shifting our response. And again, AI helps teachers. It does. I'm never going to sit here and say it's going to replace them. And it helps. It helps where people are going to have to shift their skill sets. So even with that scripted curriculum, some of these misconceptions, so the errors that students have, the question forethought, the predictions for how they respond, the teacher knows that best, right? Especially the teacher in a certain area, because we can't write. It's very generalized for the whole country. But the teacher at that school, on that campus, or in that district on that campus, they know best the misconceptions and the kind of questions that the students will have. Because again, for some of the scripted curriculum, it can be very underdeveloped or just straight up off. It's just off and not hitting what it needs to hit, what it was intended to hit. So AI can help fill in that gap because there's gaps. There's gaps. AI supports thinking and questioning in real time. So again, our goal isn't to just get some answers. Our goal is to spark thinking, making sure we're asking the questions and listening, not with that intent to be ready to explain, but to listen so we understand how to support that specifically. Not just a general explanation, this is how we get there, but to support specifically. Y'all, it's not as though, because sometimes, again, we said that memorization is rewarded as though it was mastery or is mastery, but it's not as though they can memorize, okay, well, the answer to that question was 5/6. So next time I see a fraction, the answer is going to be 5/6. We know that that's right. That seems to y'all like, really, Anika? I know that seems silly, but let's stop treating it that way. Oh, well, they got this answer right. They nailed it, but they're not explaining anything. We don't know how they got there. That's the same thing. That is the same type of response, same mindset, right? It's almost like a memorization thing, and we can't get any deeper than that. Let's stop treating it as though it's mastering. Unless we have the young people back it up with their explanation, they can write about it, they can show us a model, they can have a conversation about it. That's what we want. That's what we want. That gives us our next level thinkers while we're asking our next level questions. Okay. So, last couple of things. Y'all, if you want some more strategies, yes, we're here every Sunday at 6 o'clock, but please do make sure you sign up for our email list, our link in our bio, right? Sign up for our email list. We have some resources 10 critical thinking questions every teacher should ask, parents too. 10 inquiry-based prompts to spark math thinking. Because again, it's all about is thinking. We know this, right? A lot of us have different jobs. So we know that it's not just about, okay, what was your final answer? It's about the thought process, right? And understanding the little nuances along the way. Y'all, during this past week, we released some content on which questions are common but ineffective. Please check that out. Y'all, we do this work so that a shift can happen. We're talking about a shift to active empathy and intentional strategy, and then away from really from a lot of the jokes, right? We see a lot of content where people are making fun of in some cases, and they're just shocked, flabbergasted. People have a lot to say about what's being demonstrated as a lack of problem solving and critical thinking for the young generations. So my question always is, so what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to sit around and talk about it? Or are we shifting ourselves and doing some things so that they can get what they need and grow? Okay. All right. I'm finished fussing. But I hope that you will want to also join our next webinar, our round 2, from questions to mastery, promoting critical thinking with AI and math. Yeah, so that's also in our bio link. So sign up for the email list, get ready for the resources, make sure you're following us, and go ahead and sign up for the webinar while you're there. So, y'all, scale of 1 to 5. Have you been given some things to consider? 1 being, nope, I don't know, just nothing at all. 5 is, yeah, I have some things rolling around in my head, right? Haha. Scale of 1 to 5, let me know. How well have you been given some things to consider today? 1 being, no, nothing at all. 5, yeah, you definitely give me some things to think about, some things to act on. Okay. Okay, I see a couple of 5s. Cool, cool. Awesome, awesome. All right, but keep sharing. You all share this to anyone you know that's connected in education. Share this with a parent that you know, right? Because again, y'all, we all need reminders. Even if some of this was like, you know what, I knew this, I've gotten away from it. We all need some reminders, and it's always appreciated, right? Well, you're thinking of someone, so tag them, share this with someone, and thank y'all again so much for listening this evening. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.